Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 707. My opponent kicked off with e4, and I went with Alekhine's defense, knight f6, directly attacking that pawn in the center. My opponent played the main move here, e5, kicking the knight, went knight d5. And now my opponent played the rare knight f3. Normal moves here are d4, which could be followed up by c4 and knight to f3. That's kind of the modern line against the Alekhines, or with f4, the four pawns attack. Lots of ways to play this. Or c4 immediately, starting to chase the knight around. But, knight f3 right here is a bit unusual. And it gives me some choices on this second move here. I could actually play c5, and if he were to play c3, we've kind of transposed into something like an Alekhine Sicilian, a C3 Sicilian. So anyway, that would have been interesting, but not what happened in the game. I went with d6. Keeps it looking sort of like an Alekhine's defense, although not quite. Maybe, yeah, if he plays d4 here, it would transpose back into standard lines. But he went with c4, kicking my knight, and then playing d4 now. So we got to a position which is maybe a bit unusual. I went with knight c6, and although it's the top choice and also one of the recommendations of the chess engine, it does allow a gambit here, which is not normally in the normal lines. The player with the Alekhine's defense avoids this gambit, and the gambit is e6. You can push that pawn forward, and the point is, because this knight is on c6 already, you can't play bishop takes, which is what you would really like to do, because it runs into that fork and you have to take with a pawn. And so white sacrifices a pawn, but then there's this kind of traffic jam in front of the king here. There's an open diagonal from which the queen could deliver some nasty checks, perhaps. And in general, this good compensation for white for that pawn. Let's see. So instead of knight c6, maybe it would have been better to just develop the bishop first, get the bishop outside the pawn chain, maybe play e6, and then worry about getting the knight out. Anyway, knight c6 is what I played, and he didn't go for the gambit. He played e takes d6. I take back. And this is very similar to positions that arise out of the Alekhine's defense. So I'm reasonably comfortable here. I go bishop e7, and he castles. I castle. He goes knight to c3. And I go d5. So d5 is a blunder. What I should play here is bishop g4. You can see that would still leave us in the opening book. And we'll see why. Well, first of all, let's show the point of bishop g4. It's very typical kind of play in the Alekhine's defense. You are threatening just to trade this knight off, and when he takes back with the bishop to avoid pawn damage, this c-pawn has become undefended. So the bishop is overworked in a way, and white has to play b3. Then you can play bishop to f6, targeting this pawn with the bishop and the knight. So once again, you're threatening to trade off that knight and win a pawn. So bishop to e3, and now d5. And so this kind of play is very typical of the Alekhine's defense. You look for threats against the center and ways to develop your pieces actively. And the move here for white is c5, and then this knight retreats. So at first it looks like white has accomplished a little something, kicking your knight back and maybe gaining a little space. But the center is now closed, and black is free to reorganize his pieces and get some kind of kingside attack going. All his pieces are out. This bishop is not looking so great. So even though the chess engine evaluates this position as good for white, this is the kind of position that the player who's playing the Alekhine's defense is often going for. So this is quite playable for black. So that would be the right way to play this from this point. Back up here where I played, after knight c3, I played d5. So d5 is just a blunder, because now this bishop is in the way. When he pushes on with c5, a very natural response, this knight can't reorganize via c8 the way it did in the main lines. And there's no tempo moves here. The knight just has to move. Actually, the chess engine slightly prefers knight to c4, but that's also awkward. White will trade off that knight, and this pawn on c4 will be a target and probably won't last very long. But knight d7 just loses the pawn immediately, so I'm just a pawn down. There's really no compensation here. I get a little something going later. Well, white grabs a bishop here. That's pretty logical. Cancel that. I took back with the knight. And then develops his pieces. And I play c6. So my idea is to try and get some counterplay against the center and keep this pawn backwards. So that's how I'm trying to get some activity in this game. He goes bishop to d3. I go knight e to d5. Yeah. Put a knight in that square to blockade his pawn, keep it backwards. He goes knight to g5. So knight to g5 is the first move where white is starting to give me some of that advantage back. He could just continue with like queen d2. That's a normal developing move, connecting the rooks, and white is basically still just a pawn up. After knight g5, it's not so clear. I mean, this just well, it doesn't quite waste a move. I mean, I guess his idea was to reroute that knight to e4, but he's taken a couple of moves to do it, and allowed me to develop another piece here for free, pretty much. He takes, and then I develop another piece. So all this has been very helpful. He was still doing okay here. Probably knight d6 is the better move here. And this knight is kind of a pest on this square, and it's hitting my rook, asking where it wants to go, and then the knight can always trade itself off for this bishop, which is actually a good bishop here. I want to bring this bishop out and preserve it. So knight d6 would be a better way to play this. He took on f6. I took back with the queen. And now the final mistake that really changes the game around. I think white, still got the pawn. I have a little bit of compensation, maybe not quite enough. He could just play a normal move like queen d2 once again, connecting his rooks and be slightly better. But he went queen f3, and this just actually even allows me to get my pawn back. So, I think my opponent was following the rule that, when you're ahead, you trade the major pieces off, right, and keep your pawns, try and win the endgame. But well, you have to avoid blindly following these rules, and you have to calculate some things. So simple calculation here would have shown that after a couple of exchanges, he's got a loose pawn here, and I can just scoop it up. So now the material is even. And actually, black's a little better. Black is behind in development still, but these pieces will come out quickly. There's no immediate way for white to exploit that. And white has this weakness in the pawn structure around his king, and also maybe the d-pawn, something that could come under fire. So let's see. He plays rook a to d1. He tries to remedy some of his defects here. He's going to push that pawn forward when he can. I play bishop to e6, getting my pieces out. He goes rook to f2. I go bishop to d5. Actually, I could have gone a pawn up here and just grabbed the a pawn. Didn't notice that, but the chess engine points that out, and there's no trick to trapping the bishop. The move b3, the bishop's not trapped. It can just take the pawn on b3. Anyway, I went bishop d5, which is a good move too. It's difficult for him to defend this pawn. In fact, after a few moves, king g2, I went rook a to e8. He went to b3 now, protecting his pawns from my bishop. But I can just grab the f-pawn here. It was a nice little tactic, because after the exchange, his rook is pinned, and I can bring another piece in. And so I was fortunate to spot this during the game. One of the few times I saw the tactic instead of missing it. Let's see, he takes, and I bring my rook in. And he can't easily defend this rook. If he tries to defend this way, then I'll grab his bishop, and his rook is still pinned. So I stay a pawn up in this line, no matter what he does. In fact, yeah, this is good for black here. Let's see. He played bishop to c4, which is the best try according to the chess engine, but it does leave me a pawn up. I take the bishop off with check, and after king f2, I was a little bit worried for a second, because it is simultaneously attacking both pieces. I could have just played rook c3. I'm not sure why I didn't. Maybe I wanted to simplify the endgame, but I think this is probably better. When I go into that bishop and pawn endgame by taking his rook, and he takes my rook, I think there's a number of drawing chances that white has here, and I was kind of fortunate to win from this point. So probably keeping the rooks on until I had more of a sure advantage. I mean, the problem here is that my majority, I have an extra pawn, but my majority is over here and it's way back. So a lot of times in the endgame, it isn't the quantity of pawns you have, but the quality. And white can get a passed pawn over here that's more advanced than my passer. So he can compensate for my extra pawn by having a better quality pawn. Anyway, I start to unwind, get my king into the game with king f8. He goes d5 to liquidate his backwards pawn, and also he ends up creating a passed pawn this way. I went b6 here. My pawn is under fire and I have to move it. I was a little bit worried about c6, but after bishop to g4, it looks like I can control this square and bring my king over. So it looks like that's not a problem. So the way he played it was fine. He took, I take back, and then he plays a4. And he's going to get a passed pawn over here on the queen side. And all this is happening before I've had a chance to get my pawns going. Let's see, I played king e7. He goes king d2, gaining a tempo on my bishop. Bring the bishop out to g4. And he plays b4, so pushing these pawns forward. And now the chess engine gives me an advantage up to this point, but it doesn't like this move bishop d7 and thinks that now it's starting to look pretty drawish. Maybe I'm rushing things a little bit. The line from the chess engine is actually bishop to e6. And, I just wasn't sure about this endgame, but let's see. If he trades, plays king to c3, I play king to d6. I guess my king is close enough to stop these pawns, and my extra pass pawn will promote by itself. So I guess this is a winning king and pawn endgame. And if he doesn't trade, if he backs off with the bishop, then, this helps me. I get my king over here one step quicker, and so this probably preserves some kind of winning advantage. After bishop d7, I think it's probably drawn. And stays out. It's hard to tell. I looked at this with the chess engine. The chess engine gives a slight edge to black, still varying between a few tenths of a pawn up to 3/4 of a pawn, but it never goes up into the range where it would clearly indicate a win. And as you follow various lines out, if you play them out with the chess engine on, it eventually the rating eventually drops closer and closer to zero, the evaluation. So I think my guess is that this is actually a drawn position right here. And he plays this correctly. He plays a5. He takes, and he's got that passed pawn now. And let's see, I played bishop to c8. I want to stop his pawn. And then he played king to d3. For some reason, the chess engine likes king e3 a little better. Maybe because it stays away from the light squares. If I played like I did in the game with f6, let's see, he could go bishop to c4, I can bring my king forward, I can push on with a6. It's getting a little bit risky. King c5 gaining a tempo on his bishop, a7. I block with bishop b7, now the bishop moves, drops back to d3, and I can bring my king over to round up this pawn, but he brings his king in to stop my pawns. And I think that's maybe the clearest demonstration of why this is going to be a drawn position. His king is just in a position to blockade these pawns, and I have to spend another move to round up his pawns. And I guess, how is his king going to penetrate? His king is going to try and come in something like this and get my pawn here, which can't be defended. I can't push it forward at the moment because his bishop is on it, and I have to. I can't. My bishop is not really free to move until I take the pawn. So it looks like black is just getting to my pawns and is going to manage a draw there. Okay, anyway, he went king d3. I went f6 to liberate my king. He goes king d4. I go king d6. And bishop e4 now, holding my pawns back. Go bishop a6. I'm blockading his pawn. Pushes on with h4. That's okay. See, I go g5. I'm trying to get a passed pawn over here myself. He takes, and I take. And let's see, he went bishop to f3 here. He's got my pawns blockaded. I go king c7. I'm going to wander over here and try and pick up this pawn. He went king c5, blockading me. I drop my bishop back to d3. And now he played bishop to c6, and this is actually the losing move. So he's got a good blockade set up here, and he can just sit on this position. He's got the bishop preventing my pawns from moving, and I want to keep my bishop on this diagonal here because I want to make it easy to stop his pawn, and I want to, if I get the chance, I want to bring my king over, although his bishop makes it a little tricky. I guess my king could walk over on the dark squares like that and then attack the pawn. So that's kind of what I would like to play here. But he can make my life uncomfortable by playing king to d4. And now how does the bishop stay on this diagonal? Let's see, if I drop back here, then he can just go back and we can repeat the position. If I bring the bishop all the way forward, then I'm blocking the pawn. And so basically he just sits here with his king harassing my bishop and staying on this diagonal. Look at all the squares that are controlled or nearly controlled by white on that diagonal. Those are squares that he can attack. Or, yeah, these three are squares he can attack with his king that's controlled by his bishop. So the only really safe squares for my bishop are here and here. And yeah, it's just hard to make progress. So I think that's a draw. After bishop to c6, suddenly, and now I have a winning advantage. I get this one move in, g4, and critical to get that pawn going. But the two pawns can win against the bishop once they get advanced far enough. And I don't do anything to give up the win. So let's just go forward through the rest of this. This was all played okay. I'm just kind of sitting over here, keeping his pawn at bay and slowly pushing my pawns forward. And I'm using my pawns and my bishop to keep his king off. And then I round up his pawn and finally bring my king over. So that's, and at the same time, notice my bishop and this pawn controls his king. So his king is sitting in front of the pawn. I can't make any immediate progress, but I can just, these pawns can't be attacked, and his king can't attack him. So it gives me all the time I need to bring my king over. And eventually I get to the key position here, and now I can march my pawns forward. He can deliver some checks from behind, but I get to h5 in time, and then he resigned here, but it's actually mate in one. He only has one move, and then I queen with a mate because the bishop and the pawn are guarding all of those escape squares. So anyway, it was a nice game. Hope you guys liked this video. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I'll see you again soon.